So I had a recent revelation, a recent mind-blowing experience to me. So looking back at one of my favorite games of all time, Cuphead, in my mind, I kind of just like accepted that we're probably not going to get a Cuphead 2, you know? We're probably not going to get a new game, well, we will get a new game, but it's going to be a very long time. But Cuphead 2, probably not. I think the team has decided that they want to move on to something else, and that has been something that's really hard for me to accept because I just love Cuphead so much. But, you know, sometimes when something's just so perfect, you just gotta leave it alone. You know, don't make a cash grab sequel, anything like that. You don't want them to ruin it, you know? And not that I think they would, but, you know, you just leave perfection alone. You know, I think of like what Walt Disney said before he died. He was like, yo, do not make any sequels to my movies, because, you know, he didn't believe in them. He just said, like, it could ruin the magic of the original. And then when he died, they started making sequels. So I'm like, okay, well, anyways. So even though I do not think we are getting a Cuphead 2, I think the company has decided that they want to leave that alone. They have said that they are working on something different. In fact, we've had a lot of people, we've had the Cuphead company itself talk about how they're hiring, graphic designers to come on board and help them with their new game. So they are definitely 100% working on something else. But a lot of people are like, okay, but how long? When are we going to finally get this game? Because it's, you know, these games take forever to make, and they're kind of a smaller company, obviously. They're not Nintendo, or if they come up with an idea, they can just whip out a small game within, like, you know, a year, right? You know, Nintendo could definitely do that with their team. But the Cuphead team can't really do that because they started out with just, like, 2 brothers, and, like, you know, then they eventually got a few people to come on board and help them, and but I still think they are a smaller team, right? So it's still going to be a while. But let's break this down, because I think it's important to understand, like, the timeline here. If we're going off straight timeline, I was actually surprised to see that Cuphead itself only took about 5 years to make. Now, technically, if you want to get into the nitty-gritty with all these things, it was more like a 10-year process, but the 10 years was kind of just like when the 2 brothers had an idea, very early concept. They didn't have a lot of money, so that's why it took so long for them. But once they actually got going on it and, like, had everything figured out, had their team together, or I guess, you know, technically it was just them at the beginning, but you know what I'm saying. It actually only took about 5 years to make, maybe 5-6 years to make. So, you know, obviously, their first game is going to take a lot longer than games they make now, because they didn't have it really figured out back then. They weren't really sure. So that's why it was kind of like when they had the idea, it started, you know, 10 years before the game was released. But technically, the game only took about 5 to 6 years to actually make. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense to everyone. But, you know, and then they moved it into the DLC, and the DLC got pushed back a lot because, you know, you had COVID, you had all these problems. But the DLC actually took about 4 to 5 years, so about the same. And they did try to put a lot more work into that, even though it was, like, smaller. They tried to have more details in the background, so kind of makes sense that it took about the same time. And now, you know, we don't know what other game they're making, but I think it's safe to say that they are sticking with kind of the same style. I remember there was an interview, though I forget her name, the wife of one of the Cuphead brothers. She, like, worked on the whole, like, just, like, drawings with, like, they would make the game side of it, and she would, like, do all the drawings, and she's incredible. So you should honestly check out her work. It's so great. It's so amazing. Anyways, I believe it was her or one of the brothers said that in an interview they didn't want to, like, move away from the style of, like, 2D animation, where they just, you know, they're not just gonna change the way they make games. They're still gonna be drawing everything, and that's what makes, you know, their company is so unique, is that they draw everything like a 1930s cartoon. However, they may move away from Cuphead. Now, they might go into like a 1940s, 1950s cartoon style of animation, but they're still going to be drawing everything, which is great. And, you know, I think that's what takes a long time. That's what takes the biggest amount of time. Because if you think about it, their games, like Cuphead, isn't a very big game at all. It doesn't have, like, a ton of bosses. It doesn't have a ton of content. I mean, I love the content that's in it. It's perfect. But it's not like huge like Breath of the Wild, that took, what was it, 8 years or something to make. But, Nintendo had a bigger team and stuff. And, so the drawings themselves take, I'm not a master on this, but I think in my personal opinion, I think that's probably what takes the longest, is them having to draw everything, which can be a pain. And at the time, the wife, I really need to look up her name because I forget the name. I follow her, but I forget the name. She basically drew everything, and I'm sure they have more people. They said they've been hiring graphic designers and stuff. So I think they have more people working on this game now. So is it going to take as long as Cuphead did? Is it going to take as long as the DLC? I don't know. I feel like they kind of stick with the smaller games. I don't think they're going to go much bigger than Cuphead if they decide to go bigger and better. They might have more details in the background, kind of like the DLCs. But for now, let's just say that they're making a game similar to Cuphead. It's not Cuphead 2. It's somewhat like, the Cuphead style where it's, just them fighting bosses. You don't have a ton of detail, but, the drawings are what takes a long time. But the game itself, I bet, isn't like as big. Like, it's an indie game. Yeah, I bet it's as big as, Hollow Knight, Silksong, Cuphead, just like basic, small indie games. But there's a lot of love put into them. That's what makes them so awesome. Anyways, so let's just say it's about as big as Cuphead. Okay. At the time, they had to learn everything. Once they got going, though, with their small team, it took about 5 years. It has been about 3 years since the DLC came out for Cuphead. And I believe they started working on it about right away. And, they do have a new team. There are hiring people. So my personal guess here is that we will get the new Studio MDHR game within about 2 years. And like I said, this is just my opinion. Don't quote me on this or anything. But from everything I've seen, from all the research I've done on this, and there's not a ton of information out there, but from all the interviews I've seen, I'm kind of giving an educated guess here of about 2 more years before we get a new Cuphead game. Or not necessarily Cuphead 2, but, just the new game from Studio MDHR. However, that could mean we get an announcement for this game pretty soon. Like, they announced Cuphead way before it even came out, right? So I think we could get some kind of announcement very soon, but I don't think we're actually going to get the game for a while. Probably about 2 to 3 years. That's my educated guess. We will see what happens. But what do you guys think? Do you think Cuphead is getting a sequel? Do you think it's going to be Cuphead 2? Do you think it's something completely different? Honestly, I think it's going to be a completely different game. Same like 2D style animation where they draw everything because, they don't want to take... They just learned all those new techniques and that's what they're known for. They're not just going to change that. But it could be a different time period. Instead of a 1930s cartoon, it could be like a 1950s cartoon. But I think whatever they give us, I think it'll be pretty similar to Cuphead, depending on what they try to do. But yeah, 2 to 3 years, I think. But what do you guys think? Let me know down below in the comments. I would love to hear your thoughts. And of course, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and we will see you all in the next one. Bye, guys.